My name is Lena Wallace. 2 years ago, I sat at tables like this one, not to pour wine, but to close deals that moved mountains. Tonight, I am wearing a black server's uniform and pretending to be invisible. But invisibility, you will learn, is its own kind of power. And tonight, I'm about to use it in a way that will change everything. If you have ever watched someone destroy a room from the inside while smiling, keep watching. Because what happens in the next 30 minutes of this story will show you that the most dangerous person in any negotiation is never the one at the head of the table. And if this is your first time here, hit that subscribe button right now, because we tell stories here that nobody else dares to tell. You need to understand the room before you understand the crime. The Polaris suite exists above the 42nd floor of the Grand Meridian Hotel. It is not listed on any public menu. You cannot book it through the restaurant's website. It is rented by invitation only by the kind of people who do not carry their own luggage or open their own doors. Tonight, it holds 4 men in one deal worth $300 million. At the head of the table sits Mr. Kwan. You have served him before, twice, and each time you notice the same thing. He is the calmest man in any room he enters, yet somehow the room rearranges itself around him. He is 61 years old, with the stillness of a man who has survived things he will never speak of publicly. Tonight he is dressed in a charcoal suit with no tie, and he is watching the 2 Americans across from him with the quiet focus of a man counting cards. The Americans, Bradley Holt and a younger associate named Craig, are from OmniCorp. You know the name. Everyone in your former world knew the name. OmniCorp does not build things. It buys things. Then it dismantles them and sells the parts. It is a company that has mastered the art of walking into rooms like this one and walking out with more than it came with. Bradley is mid-50s, silver-templed, and with the particular confidence of a man who believes his money makes him smarter than he actually is. And then there is Julian. Julian Park is the translator. He is 34, fluent in 4 languages, and he carries himself with the kind of ease that makes people trust him immediately. His posture is relaxed, his smile comes quickly. His eyes are always calculating. You have noticed this before, the way some people wear warmth like a costume. Julian wears warmth like armor. You pour water, you disappear into the background, and then you hear it. Mr. Kwan speaks in Mandarin. His tone is firm, measured, unambiguous. He says, and you hear this clearly because your mother was from Chengdu and you grew up between 2 languages. The equity clause is non-negotiable, 40% or we do not proceed. You watch Julian's face receive those words. You watch the micropause, barely half a second, where his expression does something private that no one else in the room catches. And then he turns to Bradley Holt and says in smooth, confident English, Mr. Kwan says he is open to revisiting the equity structure. He believes there is flexibility on both sides. You stop moving. The tray in your hands becomes very heavy, because what Julian just did, with the casual precision of a surgeon, is not a translation error. There is no such thing as accidentally converting non-negotiable to open to revisiting. Those 2 phrases do not exist in the same linguistic universe. What Julian just did is a lie, a deliberate architectural load-bearing lie, and it has just been inserted into the foundation of a $300 million deal like a crack no one will see until the building falls. You retreat to the service corridor. Your hands are shaking, not from fear, from recognition. You need to understand what I lost before you understand what I was about to risk. 26 months ago, I was a senior associate at Mercer Blackwell International, one of the top arbitration firms in the Asia-Pacific region. I negotiated cross-border contracts in 4 languages. I had a corner office, a team of 8, and a reputation that took 11 years to build. And then, in 72 hours, it was gone. Someone planted forged documents on my work laptop, fabricated emails that showed me sharing confidential client data with a competitor. I was investigated, suspended, and ultimately disbarred from practicing. My firm dropped me within the week. My clients disappeared. The colleague who testified against me, a man I had mentored for 3 years, delivered his statement with the same calm Julian is wearing right now. I never found out who orchestrated it. I only knew the name that kept surfacing in the background of the case, always just far enough away to be deniable. OmniCorp. And now, 2 years later, I am standing in a service corridor 42 floors above the city, holding a tray of water glasses, watching an OmniCorp operation play out in real time. The same playbook, the same architecture of deception, the same quiet demolition of something real being replaced with something false, and no one in the room knowing the difference. My father was a civil engineer. He built bridges, literal ones, across rivers and chasms in 3 countries. He used to say, "Lena, the most dangerous part of any structure is never the one that looks broken. It is the joint that looks perfect while it is failing." He meant it as engineering, but he was also describing the world. He died broke, discredited, after a competitor falsified the structural assessments on a bridge he had designed. The bridge held. The lie didn't. He never recovered. I am my father's daughter, and I am about to do something that could cost me the only job I have left. I set the tray down on the counter. I breathe. I think about the man at that table who has no idea his trusted translator is gutting him alive. I think about silence makes you complicit in. I think about my father saying, "The joint that looks perfect while it is failing." I think about Julian's half-second pause before he converted non-negotiable to flexible. And then I pick up a bottle of Chateau Petrus 2009, $3,000, the most expensive wine on tonight's service list, and I walk back into the room. You have to understand dark psychology to understand what Julian is doing and why it works so well. The most effective deceptions are never dramatic. They do not announce themselves. They do not arrive with red flags and alarm bells. The most effective deceptions are structural. They are built into the foundation of the communication itself, so that by the time anyone realizes something is wrong, the entire deal has already been constructed on a lie. Julian is not lying wildly. He is lying precisely, selectively, only at the load-bearing points. Everything else he translates perfectly. The water temperature preferences, the scheduling logistics, the pleasantries, all accurate. This is deliberate. This is what makes him brilliant and monstrous at the same time. If he mistranslated everything, someone would notice, but mistranslating only the things that matter while everything else remains accurate, that builds trust. That makes you, the witness, doubt your own perception. I had doubted myself for the first 3 minutes. I had thought, maybe I misheard. Maybe there's a dialect variance I'm not accounting for. Maybe I'm projecting. But then I heard the second lie. Mr. Kwan had asked, directly, what is their timeline for the due diligence period? A simple, factual question with a simple, factual answer. Julian told the Americans that Mr. Kwan was requesting an expedited timeline of 30 days. Mr. Kwan had made no mention of 30 days. Mr. Kwan had asked a question, not made a demand. Julian had fabricated an entire position out of thin air and handed it to Bradley Holt as Mr. Kwan's words. Bradley's eyes lit up because an expedited due diligence period would have put enormous pressure on Kwan Industries to rush disclosures, potentially missing things. It was a trap, and Mr. Kwan had just been reported as the one who said it. This is not incompetence. This is a weapon. I carry the Petrus to the table. I make eye contact with no one. I lean toward the sommelier station on the far side, and then, in the kind of casual redirect that looks like nothing, I angle toward Kwan's side of the table instead. I pour a small measure into his glass. I lean down slightly, as though checking the pour level, and in a voice barely above silence, I say it in Mandarin, directly into the space beside his ear. The translator is lying to you. He is converting your firm positions into negotiable ones and fabricating demands on your behalf that you never made. I have heard everything. I straighten up. I adjust the bottle. I move away. For 3 seconds, nothing happens. And then the room changes temperature. You can feel power shift before you can see it. There is something in the air, a pressure change, like a storm front moving through, and then Mr. Kwan sets his glass down with a quietness that is louder than any noise in the room. "Mr. Park," he says, in English, which surprises everyone, because until this moment he had spoken only Mandarin. "Would you please repeat your last translation, word for word?" Julian blinks, once.
And in that blink, you see the calculation happen. You see him processing whether this is a test, whether Mr. Kwan somehow knows, whether he should bluff or retreat. Julian is smart. He chooses to bluff. "Of course," Julian says, with the smoothness of a man who has done this before. "I conveyed your position on the due diligence timeline, that 30 days would be the preferred window for expedited processing." Silence. "I see," Mr. Kwan says. Bradley Holt leans forward slightly, expecting the negotiation to continue. "The problem," Mr. Kwan says, still in English, still with that eerie quiet, "is that I never mentioned 30 days. I asked a question. I asked what your timeline was. I made no demand." He pauses. "My English, as you may not have known, is entirely sufficient to understand what I said and what was returned to me." Another pause, the kind that fills a room. "I chose to use a translator tonight as a professional courtesy and as a test." Bradley Holt's face goes through 4 expressions in 2 seconds. Julian's face goes through none, which is somehow worse. "Mr. Park," Mr. Kwan says, turning to Julian with the calm of a man dismantling something carefully, "you have been translating for OmniCorp's interests for 7 months. I know this. I knew it before you walked through that door. What I needed tonight was confirmation that you would act on it." He reaches into his jacket pocket and places a small recording device on the table. "I have it." And here is the part that no one in that room, not Bradley, not Craig, not Julian, is prepared for. Mr. Kwan looks across the table at Bradley Holt and says, "I know about the Meridian contract. I know about the falsified assessments in the 2021 Singapore deal. I know what your company does to people who get in the way." He stands. "This meeting is over. My legal team will be in touch." Security appears at the door within 30 seconds. Julian is escorted out. Bradley and Craig gather their things with the stunned efficiency of men who have been in rooms like this before, but never on the wrong side. And then they are gone. And the room is very, very quiet. I am in the service corridor when the door opens and one of Mr. Kwan's associates finds me. "Mr. Kwan would like to speak with you." My heart is doing something complicated, because what I have just done, what felt in the moment like the only possible choice, I am now realizing had consequences I had not fully mapped. I have just inserted myself into a corporate dispute involving one of the most powerful businessmen in the Asia-Pacific region and one of the most aggressive conglomerates in the world. I have broken the first and most sacred rule of service work: be invisible. I have made myself extremely visible. I follow the associate back into the Polaris suite. Mr. Kwan is standing at the window. The city stretches out below him, all light and distance. He does not turn immediately. When he does, his expression is not what I expected. It is not suspicious or cold. It is curious, the way someone looks at a thing they did not expect to find. "Sit," he says, gesturing to a chair. Not a command, an invitation. I sit. "You speak Mandarin," he says. "My mother was from Chengdu. I grew up between 2 languages. I studied 2 more in university. I stop. I take a breath. I am sorry. I should start with who I am." "Please," he says. "My name is Lena Wallace. Until 26 months ago, I was a senior associate at Mercer Blackwell International. I specialized in cross-border commercial arbitration. I was disbarred after someone planted fabricated evidence on my work laptop showing me sharing confidential client data. The investigation cleared no one and implicated me entirely. I have been working here for 18 months. Mr. Kwan is quiet for a moment. "Who do you believe was responsible?"
I look at him directly. The same company whose people you just had escorted out of this room. Something moves across his face. Not surprise, recognition. Tell me, he says, turning to Julian with the calm of a man dismantling something carefully, the name of your colleague who testified against you. This is not the question I expect. His name was Derek Lau. He had been my associate for 3 years. Derek Lau, Mr. Kwan says, received a consulting contract from an OmniCorp subsidiary 6 weeks before your investigation began. The contract was routed through a shell company in the Cayman Islands. The payment was $420,000. He pauses. My English, as you may not have known, is entirely sufficient to understand what I said and what was returned to me. Another pause, the kind that fills a room. I chose to use a translator tonight as a professional courtesy and as a test. The room tilts slightly. I grip the arm of the chair. You have been building a case, I say slowly. For 3 years, he says. Julian was not an accident. It was an invitation. I needed OmniCorp to move against me directly so that I could capture the mechanism in real time. He sits across from me. What you did tonight was not in my plan, but it may have been better than my plan. Why? Because you were not one of my people. You were independent, a witness with nothing to gain and everything to lose. That is, legally speaking, the most valuable kind of testimony there is. I stare at him. You want me to testify? Eventually, he says. First, I want to give you something. Comment below right now. Have you ever witnessed something wrong happening and had to decide whether to speak up or stay silent? Tell me what you did. I read every comment.
He slides a folder across the table. I open it. What I see inside dismantles the last 2 years of my life in the best possible way. There are internal OmniCorp emails, dated, named, specific, discussing a competitive neutralization strategy targeting Mercer Blackwell clients. There is a financial record tracing a payment of $420,000 through a Cayman Islands vehicle to a personal account registered to Derek Lau. There is a sworn affidavit from an OmniCorp IT contractor, a man named Stephen Cho, describing how he was hired to remotely access the work laptops of targeted employees and plant fabricated communications. There is a forensic analysis of my former work laptop showing the metadata signature of the planted files, timestamps that do not match my work patterns, IP addresses that trace back to a server in Shenzhen that has since been decommissioned. And there, in the middle of the folder, is a single page with my name at the top. It is a complete record of every professional action taken against me. And beside each action is a notation, a source, a date, a payment. My disbarment was not an investigation. It was a purchase. I put the folder down. I press my hands flat on the table. I focus on breathing. How long have you had this? I ask. The full dossier on your specific case, 8 months, Mr. Kwan says. I was looking for the right moment to use it. You accelerated that timeline considerably tonight. I feel something I have not felt in 2 years. Anger without helplessness. Fury with a direction. Because for 26 months, I have carried the weight of something I was told I did, something I knew I didn't do, something I could not prove I hadn't done. And now it is sitting in a folder on a table in front of me, documented and time-stamped and sworn. What happens now? I ask. Now, Mr. Kwan says, I make some phone calls and you go home. And in approximately 72 hours, you will receive a courier. I go home. I sit in my apartment, a studio, 200 square feet smaller than my old office, and I stare at the wall. I replay the whisper, the glass on the table, Julian's blink, Mr. Kwan's voice saying in English, I chose to use a translator tonight as a professional courtesy and as a test. I think about my father's bridge, the joint that looks perfect while it is failing.
I do not sleep. On the second day, nothing happens. On the third day, a courier arrives at 9 a.m. with a package the size of a shoebox. Inside is the full dossier, not just the summary Mr. Kwan showed me in the Polaris suite, but everything. 240 pages. A cover letter from Mr. Kwan's legal team states that copies have been filed with the Singapore Arbitration Commission, the Hong Kong Law Society, and the United States Securities and Exchange Commission. A separate letter on Mercer Blackwell International letterhead, the firm that fired me, states that on review of new evidence, my disbarment proceedings are being formally reopened with a strong recommendation for reversal. At the bottom of the package, there is a handwritten note on plain cardstock, 5 words in Mr. Kwan's handwriting. Come to my office Monday. I stand outside Kwan Industries headquarters on Monday morning in the suit I have kept in a garment bag for 2 years. It is the suit I wore on the day I signed my first major arbitration agreement. It is charcoal gray, perfectly fitted, and it has been hanging in the dark since the day I was told to leave my office and not return. I put it on this morning and stood in front of my bathroom mirror for a long time. The woman looking back at me is not the ghost who has been moving through the Meridian Hotel for 18 months. She is someone else, someone older and sharper and less willing to be invisible. I take the elevator to the 38th floor. Mr. Kwan's office is exactly what you would expect from a man who values precision over display. Clean lines, minimal furniture, one large window looking out at the harbor. He is already seated when I arrived, and across the desk from him is a chair that is positioned deliberately, not across the desk, beside it, as though we are on the same side of something. I sit. I have a proposal, he says, without preamble. I'm listening. Kwan Industries has an international negotiations division. It was, until recently, one of the strongest in the region. OmniCorp has spent 3 years systematically dismantling it, buying off translators, planting disinformation, recruiting our people, discrediting our legal advisors. He pauses. I need someone to rebuild it. Not just rebuild it, fortify it. Someone who understands both the language of contracts and the language of deception. Someone who has seen what OmniCorp does from the inside of one of their operations and survived it. He looks directly at me. I am offering you the position of head of international negotiations. I am quiet for a moment. You don't know me, I said. I spent 1 hour with you. I have spent 8 months reviewing your case. I know your professional record. I know the contracts you closed, the disputes you mediated, the clients you kept, and the ones you walked away from because they asked you to compromise. In 11 years of practice, you were never once the subject of a legitimate complaint. The complaint that ended your career was not legitimate. You know that. I know that. And in approximately 90 days, the Singapore Arbitration Commission will know that officially. I look out the window at the harbor. There is a container ship moving slowly across the water, and I think absurdly about bridges, about load-bearing joints, about the difference between a structure that looks intact and one that actually is. OmniCorp will come after me again, I say. Yes, Mr. Kwan says. They will. And you want me to walk back into that? I want you to walk back into it with the full resources of Kwan Industries behind you, a legal team that has been building a case against them for 3 years, and evidence that has already been filed with 3 regulatory bodies. He leans forward slightly. Lena, you were already in it. The moment you sat down in that room 2 years ago, you were in it. The question was never whether OmniCorp would find you. The question was whether you would be standing or kneeling when they did. The room is very quiet. I think about the version of me that has been invisible for 26 months. I think about the particular comfort of disappearing, how it had started as survival and slowly become a habit, a way of managing the fear of being seen again by the kind of people who had already proven they could destroy me. I think about the server's uniform folded on my kitchen chair at home. I think about what it felt like to carry that tray into the Polaris suite and hear Julian's half-second pause before he converted non-negotiable into flexible. I think about my father's bridge, the joint that looks perfect while it is failing. I have conditions, I say. Of course you do. Mr. Kwan almost smiles. Full authority over my team, no interference in my methods, and whatever evidence you have filed with the regulatory bodies, I want copies in my hands, not just on record. If OmniCorp moves against me again, I need to be able to move first. Agreed. And I want the IT contractor, Stephen Cho. I want to meet with him personally. I will arrange it. And one more thing. I look at him directly. Derek Lau, my former associate, the one who testified against me. A pause. What about him? I want to know where he is, not to do anything harmful. I want to look him in the eye and tell him that I know exactly what he did and that he will spend the rest of his career looking over his shoulder for the moment the evidence catches up with him, because that moment is coming. I pause, and then I want to go back to work. Mr. Kwan is quiet for a moment. Then he says, I remind me of someone. Who? Me. 20 years ago. He stands. He extends his hand. Welcome to Kwan Industries, Ms. Wallace. I shake it, and something that has been braced for 2 years, a tension I had stopped noticing because I had gotten so used to carrying it, releases.
If you have made it this far in this story, do me a favor and hit that like button right now. It costs you nothing, and it tells me that this kind of story is worth making more of. I pour everything into these. Every single one. The next 6 months moved differently than any 6 months I can remember. The disbarment is formally reversed in week 11. The reversal notice arrives in my email at 6:47 a.m. on a Tuesday, and I read it standing in the kitchen of an apartment I have already started packing up, because Mr. Kwan's offer came with a relocation package and a downtown address that takes 7 minutes to walk to the office. I read the notice twice. Then I put my phone face down on the counter and stand very still for about 3 minutes. I do not cry. I am not sure what I do exactly. I think I simply allow myself to feel the weight of what it means. Not euphoria, not relief exactly, but something more like structural restoration, like watching a bridge that has been closed for 2 years reopen to traffic. The bones were always sound. Now people can see it. The SEC investigation into OmniCorp opens formally in week 15. Bradley Halt is placed on administrative leave from OmniCorp's board pending review of his role in what is now being described in public filings as a pattern of coordinated competitive interference across multiple jurisdictions. Julian Park cooperates immediately in exchange for a reduced sentence on charges of fraud and breach of fiduciary duty. His cooperation produces 17 additional names. The investigation expands. Stephen Cho, the IT contractor who planted files on my laptop, meets with me in a conference room on the 22nd floor of Kwan Industries in week 8. He is a small man, mid-40s, with the particular hollowness of someone who has been carrying guilt for a long time. He sits across from me and cannot maintain eye contact for the first 10 minutes. I let him sit in the discomfort. I do not rush it. Eventually, he says, I didn't know who you were. They just gave me a name and a laptop serial number. I know. I'm not here for an apology. I'm here because I want to understand the methodology. Walk me through exactly how it was done. Every step. He does, and as he talks, I take notes, and what I am building, quietly, in the margins of everything else, is a complete technical and procedural map of exactly how OmniCorp constructs its attacks. Because the thing about a weapon is that once you understand its mechanics, you can build a defense. And once you can build a defense, you can teach others to build it too. That becomes the core of what I build at Kwan Industries, not just a negotiations division, a fortress, a team of people who understand that in any high-stakes international deal, the
The threat is not always across the table. Sometimes the threat is sitting beside you, wearing the costume of a trusted colleague, doing a half-second pause before converting your non-negotiable positions into something flexible, something pliable, something that can be shaped into whatever serves the person paying them. We build verification protocols, every translator vetted by an independent third party, every communication between our team and external parties logged and reviewed, every negotiation room swept for recording devices by our own team before we use someone else's. We build redundancy into the chain of trust the way my father built redundancy into his bridges, not because you expect every joint to fail, but because you know that the one joint you didn't reinforce is always the one that does. 6 months after the night in the Polaris suite, I walk into a negotiation room in Seoul. The table is long and dark and surrounded by people who have been doing this for decades. On the other side is a delegation from a European infrastructure fund looking to acquire a controlling interest in a regional logistics network that Kwon Industries has built over 7 years. It is a $2.4 billion deal, the largest I have ever been in the room for. Mr. Kwon is beside me. He does not sit at the head of the table. He sits beside me, slightly back, in a position that says to everyone in the room, she is the one you should be speaking to. I open my portfolio. I look across the table at the lead negotiator, a woman named Dr. Hannah Berg, 63 years old, Norwegian, with a reputation for dismantling deals she doesn't believe in with surgical precision. She has been doing this longer than I have been practicing. She looks at me. I look at her, and something passes between us that is not competition. It is recognition. Two people who understand that this table is not a battlefield, it is a bridge, and bridges are only worth building if they are built on something real. Shall we begin? I say. The room settles, and I feel something I thought I had lost permanently, the clean, particular confidence of a person sitting exactly where they belong, doing exactly the work they were built for, with nothing to hide and nothing to prove, and every load-bearing joint checked and sound. My father used to say that the best bridges are not the ones that look impressive, they are the ones that hold, quietly, without needing to announce themselves, the ones that do their job so well that people forget to notice them at all and simply cross. I think about him now, in this room, not with grief, with something steadier, with the kind of inheritance you don't receive in a will, the kind that lives in your spine, the way you hold yourself, the way you look at a room and see not just what is in it, but what it's built on. I was destroyed by people who understood that the fastest way to collapse a structure is to compromise the foundation quietly before anyone looks. They were right about that. But they did not account for is what happens when the foundation turns out to be stronger than the attack. What they did not account for is a woman who grew up understanding load-bearing joints in her bones, who spent 2 years invisible and came back knowing exactly which joints to reinforce. The negotiation in Seoul ran for 3 days. It closed on the terms we arrived with, not compromised, not flexible, not converted into something more palatable for the other side. On our terms, built on something real. On the flight back, Mr. Kwon asks me if I am glad I spoke that night in the Polaris suite. I think about the question seriously. I don't think I had a choice, I say. Not a real one. No, he says. People with integrity rarely do. If you made it this far in this story, you are exactly the kind of person this channel exists for. The kind of person who stays when it gets complicated, who doesn't look away when the stakes get real. That is a rare thing, and I do not take it for granted. Hit that subscribe button if you haven't already. Share this story with someone who needs to hear it. Leave a comment telling me the moment in this story that hit you hardest. Was it the whisper? The dossier? The moment she put the suit back on? Because Lena's story is not just a story. It is a reminder that the most dangerous thing you can be to the people who want you invisible is someone who decides to be seen. And the most powerful sentence you will ever speak might not be in a boardroom or a courtroom. It might be a whisper. 5 words in the right ear at the right moment. That is all it takes to change everything.